$118 million. That was the average cost for the top 10 highest grossing movies in 2004, featuring movies like Shrek 2, Spider-Man 2, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. But there is another movie with a much lower budget that killed in 2004 and is still pretty relevant to this day. Napoleon Dynamite. Directed by Jared Hess. Yes, the same guy directing the Minecraft movie. Go watch my video on that. Napoleon Dynamite showcases the boring rural life of a teenage misfit, learning his place in life through a real, albeit kind of cringy lens, and has been a classic for years.
I want you to go see if Tina wants some of this.
But why has this underdog of a film stayed so popular? So Napoleon Dynamite takes place in Preston, Idaho, a pretty much middle of nowhere town where there is nothing to do. And coincidentally, it's where Jared Hess, the director, grew up, and he based a lot of the movie's events around his own personal experiences, as he was also the one who wrote it. And the movie being set out where nobody knows where it is one of the reasons that kind of makes the movie stand out. Not a lot of movies are typically set in this kind of area, in especially the Western US, but they are often shot here. So I live in Utah, so just below Idaho, but Idaho and Utah are pretty common filming locations just because you're within so many different kinds of locations. But anyways, not a lot of movies are set here. Whereas a place like New York, Chicago, LA, Las Vegas, a lot of movies get set in those more populated areas. So to have a movie set in the middle of nowhere is interesting. Within Napoleon Dynamite, it's used to find the extraordinary within the extraordinary. Because not a lot really goes on in the small rural towns, especially in the early 2000s, prior to social media and the internet. And I mean, the internet was around, or like video streaming. It wasn't as prevalent as it is today, so you couldn't really deal with the boredom in a similar fashion. You get so bored that you're going to tow an action figure on your way to school in the bus just by chucking it out a window and holding it on a string, which is what Napoleon does at the beginning of the movie. And to many, this film doesn't really seem like a whole lot, but that is kind of the beauty of a setting like this. Not a whole lot can happen, and so the kind of stuff that does happen propels the characters and the story forward. So to tell a story like Napoleon Dynamite, you do have to find stories where there is none. Things like, how do teenagers of this time deal with boredom? How do you make friends in a small town where everyone already knows each other and life is like 10 years behind the rest of the world? Do you risk embarrassing yourself in front of essentially everyone that lives around you in order to help your friend? These types of stories and conflicts are what appear when you place a story in such a seemingly boring location. Creativity just kind of thrives when there's nothing else around. Napoleon is like this. He seems to be letting his imagination run wild.
What'd you do all last summer again?
I told you, I spent it with my uncle in Alaska hunting wolverines.
Did you shoot any?
Yes, like 50 of them.
And kind of using it to make up stories and drawing to get through the day, and it's just a struggle for him every day. And this struggle also allows for some pretty humorous and cringy moments to surface. The typical response when someone either watches Napoleon for the first time, or if you're watching it again, is to both laugh and implode at the awkwardness that occurs just at the everyday things that happen in Napoleon's life. It is just incredibly relatable watching Napoleon live through his high school experience. The awkward forwardness that Napoleon kind of exudes and is not fully aware of himself.
I see you're drinking 1%. Is that because you think you're fat? Because you're not. You could be drinking whole if you wanted to.
Kind of reminds you of learning how to navigate just social situations in general in high school, just because you're super hyper aware now of your own existence with others. So now you kind of have to navigate how to interact with that a little bit more. You know, you become dramatic because of the hormones that are raging through your body, and Napoleon exudes that as well, constantly snapping at people or getting annoyed just because that's life.
How was school?
Worst day of my life? What do you think?
So the humor from it kind of comes from the cringe, as well as the cringe comes from the humor. They kind of feed into each other, where it's so awkward but it's hilarious at the same time. And that's, high school is just a vicious cycle like that. Everyone has to go through it, and having a movie that really showcases that makes it that much more relatable and empathetic to its audience. It's why a few years later, another movie called Superbad would do it also pretty well, because it followed that same concept. And I think essentially Napoleon Dynamite walked so that Superbad could run, because both of them are pretty funny and they can be cringe in their own little high school awkwardness ways, and they do it within similar aspects, although they definitely have different demographics that they're putting it towards, but overall concept is kind of the same. It's misfits in high school just trying to get through it, and they're super awkward. That's kind of how it goes. But the point is that Napoleon Dynamite feels the way it does because it's just that real. You have those times where something so awkward, like drawing a picture for someone or standing on a stage in front of your entire school, was so unbelievably painful and awkward that afterwards or during, you just can't help but laugh. And that's kind of the beauty of Napoleon Dynamite. It's the embodiment of those feelings and experiences, and decided to showcase it like the underrated champ that it is.
For only $300, you can sign up right now for my 8-week program.
So at the beginning of the video, I mentioned that Napoleon Dynamite's budget was much lower than the other major movies of the same year, and I am not joking. While movies like Spider-Man 2 and Harry Potter, their average budget, because I was just going based off the top 10 highest grossing, their average budget was around $118 million, which is crazy. That's a pretty high cost. Napoleon Dynamite used only $400,000.
It's like $1 an hour.
So, like what? A very small fraction, like a 200th essentially of the budget of other major movies of the time. Like, that's insane. That's crazy in and of itself, that such a hilarious feature film could be done on such a low cost. And it grossed around $46 million with the box office, which doesn't really seem like a lot, especially compared to like the other movies where they would average around a $600 million turnout, which is pretty good. And that's around about like 500% return.
This is looking really good.
You can say that again.
Which is pretty good. That's pretty decent to make a movie for $118 million and get around 500% back. Napoleon, with $400,000 budget and making $46 million at the box office, that alone was an 11,000% return, which is crazy. That's so much money, and for having such a low budget and getting back so much, wild, absolutely wild. And it kind of led to a shift in the movie industry that caused the major studios to focus on some more indie films, as they could be cheaper and could still turn a major profit as long as they were done well.
What the heck are you guys doing? Trying to ruin my life and make me look like a friggin' idiot?
I'm out making some sweet moolah with Uncle Rico.
And while the industry does kind of shift again later, like I feel like we're seeing that again now. We're seeing a return in the industry from indie films being a lot more prevalent. And I think a few years ago, A24 was kind of leading the charge with that. And then right now, they still kind of are, but at the same time, you're also having just people like YouTubers or more independent producers and creators just deciding, well, we're going to make our own movie just because, and that'll be fun, and then they'll try and get it in Sundance or another film festival and maybe get it distributed onto a streaming service or something. And it's just interesting, and they can do it without a major studio at all. And while Napoleon Dynamite wasn't the first one to do this, like they definitely weren't. There were other indie films that would have done that. Napoleon Dynamite has such a cultural impact that that it's continued that influence of wanting indie films within Hollywood to kind of flourish throughout the years. It's managed to still inspire indie filmmakers to continue making movies no matter what the cost. Like, you don't have to have millions and millions of dollars to make a good movie, to make a fun movie, even if it's cringe or real. It inspires people to go out and make their own, Napoleon Dynamite. And that's what's so great about it. And so, because we're saying how great it is, we got to get into our rating of Napoleon Dynamite. And this one's, it's going to go a little weird because our usual rating scale, is usually garbage, once is fine, right mood, quotable, go to, and all day, every day. And while Napoleon Dynamite is a all day, every day kind of movie, like it's pretty good, and it's so much fun, and you can just constantly rewatch it. But because of all the quotes that come from it, I think it has to go in quotable, because there are quotes like,
Tina, you fat lard, come get some dinner. Tina, eat. Eat the food.
and
Stay home and eat all the freaking chips, Kip.
Napoleon, don't be jealous that I've been chatting online with babes all day.
quotable doesn't really mean bad. Like, even though it's our third rating, the movie is quotable. And like all day, everyday movies can also be quotable, but this one, like, quotable is pretty much every line in the movie. You can find something within every scene that you can reference with somebody and they'll be like, that's from Napoleon Dynamite. And that is why I think it goes in quotable rather than just all day, every day. And now let's get on to our question of the week to get you invested in the conversation of this week's topic. And since we were kind of talking a little bit about boredom and creativity thriving in nothing, their question of the week is, what is something you would do when you were bored as a kid?
Whatever I feel like I want to do. God.
For me personally, I would lay on the floor in our living room, because when I was younger, like, we weren't allowed like on the computer all that often. We would usually get like maybe a half hour or an hour a day, so you wouldn't be on the computer all that much. We had to take turns on watching movies or TV, which, you know, that's pretty normal, I feel like, for most families. But if you didn't have any of those things, especially because like streaming wasn't a thing until later in my life, if there wasn't a good show on TV, you kind of just suffered, or you had to watch another movie that you've seen a million times. So on those days, I definitely would just lay on the floor in the living room sometimes. If the sun was shining through, I would just go lay there. That was not a very uncommon occurrence for me if I was super bored. But you know what I learned early on? Don't tell your mom you're bored, because then she makes you do things. And so that's not fun. Don't do that. That's our question of the week. What is something you would do when you were bored when you were a kid? Let us know in the comments down below. And that is it for this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, give us a like and a follow so you can be notified of all the latest episodes, because it's a fun time being easily entertained around here. We all talk about the good stuff. It's wonderful. Check out our Instagram and TikTok so you can get more entertainment things or clips. If you haven't seen the full episodes, it's always a great time. And until next time, bye!